until I got to looking closer. I thought
And
it
you
was just
yourself.
something
All
you
right,
got off the
be
internet.
quiet. All right. Rivers have been the lifeblood of civilization for as long as humans have been on Earth. They're beautiful and tranquil, mighty and powerful, and necessary to sustain life. But now they're in danger. All of you in here have been impacted in some form or fashion by a river in your life, whether it's the drinking water in your tap or the electricity that runs your lights and everything in your house, or just a place to get away and enjoy nature. We can't really live without it. So I've spent countless hours fishing, boating, swimming all across the state of Alabama on different rivers, and I've seen how each one is unique, as well as how each one has been affected by humans. And now I fear that we have destroyed one of our most precious resources. So now I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the current state of Alabama waterways, as well as how the government as well as citizens can try and fix the problems that we've caused. So over the past 100 years or so, Alabama waterways have faced serious deterioration at the hands of society. And the government as well as citizens need to stop the spread of invasive species, ban projects and companies that pollute rivers, and eliminate damage caused by dams. And I'm going to tell you guys how we can do that. So according to R. Scott Duncan in an article called Biodiversity in Alabama, Alabama ranks #1 in the country for freshwater biodiversity. And we also have a number of species that only live right here in Alabama. But unfortunately, invasive species threaten to wipe those native species completely out. And one such species is known as the Alabama bass. And as you can tell by the name, they are native to certain rivers in Alabama. But over the past decade or so, and even before that, anglers and different people unintentionally and intentionally transported Alabama bass to different river systems in Alabama as well as in neighboring states. And according to an article by Mother Nature Network, Alabama bass dominate the gene pool and outcompete other native bass in river systems where they have been introduced. The article goes on to talk about ways that we can eliminate this problem. And one of those applies to just your average everyday angler. So as an angler, when you go out and you are in a river system where Alabama bass or any other invasive species doesn't belong, and you catch one of those, it's important to actually pull that fish out of the water and not allow it to go back. And so with that, as well as restocking native fish into those places, we can kind of balance the situation where native fish will be back where they're supposed to be and invasive species will not be there anymore. So now we're going to talk about the problems that dams have caused. Dams have caused serious damage to fish populations all over the world, and significantly right here in Alabama. And I was actually fortunate enough to interview the author of Fly Fishing for Red-Eye Bass, who is also a scientist at Auburn University. His name is Matt Lewis. And when I was interviewing, we were talking about threats to Alabama rivers. And according to Lewis, the damming of rivers has been one of the single most harmful human-induced changes to our native biodiversity here in Alabama. And then he went on to say that it's actually caused us to lose more species than a lot of states even have to begin with, which is kind of a cool thought when you think about how many fish species we have here in Alabama, but it's also very sobering when you think about just how much damage we have caused in the past century or so. And so his solutions are to create fish passage areas around hydroelectric dams. And what that would look like is at a giant dam, like one that would be holding back Lake Martin or something like that, a dam that we couldn't really get rid of because it would cause a ton of damage. Creating what's called a fish ladder, where a fish can actually swim up and around and continue its migratory path past the lake and on up the river. And then another thing he talks about was removing low head dams, and these are dams that don't necessarily serve any real purpose. They just kind of have really destroyed the habitat of native fish here in Alabama. And so the government seriously needs to consider these changes in order to reset the damage that we have caused. And so the third thing we're going to talk about is pollution. And so civilization and urbanization over the past decade or so has really, and really even before that, has placed a lot of stress on rivers here in Alabama and across the world in the form of pollution. And the government really needs to regulate pollution before it's too late. And just an example of that was just this summer here, just north of us, just north of Birmingham, a catastrophe happened along the banks of the Black Warrior River. And according to Alabama.com, Tyson Foods had a waste spill that spread E. coli, killing 175,000 fish in the Black Warrior River. And those effects were felt 40 miles downstream of dead fish and just some really irreplaceable damage. And I think that the government should not allow plants like this that pose such a threat. I don't think they should be allowed to operate along major river systems. And the ones that are allowed to should have to undergo regular checks and higher regulations just to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again. And so what you can do as the average person, just the average citizen, stop littering and also pick up after people that you see, because littering at any place eventually winds up in rivers and it kind of collects there. And while it is an eyesore, it is also seriously damaging to the environment. And then on a larger scale, there's tons of volunteer efforts that, like the Cahaba River Society and things of that nature, that put on cleanups once a month or so, and those impacts are seriously helpful. So, in conclusion, the government and all citizens of Alabama need to take immediate action in order to combat issues that, such as invasive species, dams, and pollution that have really hurt our river systems. And so now that you guys have heard a little bit about the threats to one of our most precious resources and the steps that you can take to help fix it, I hope that you guys will take action. Rivers are important to each and every one of us, and they need our protection.